AI has strong applications as it relates to research, editing. So, for example, in the book, we say research, like, say, for example, you're doing a sermon series on marriage. If you're a pastor, Matthew 19, okay, ChatGPT, Claude, whatever program, can you find me sermons by Tertullian on Matthew 19 and Origen and Martin Luther King Jr. and Dietrich Bonhoeffer and Luther and pick your favorite theologians or theologians you most respect and put them side by side. Where do they overlap? Where do they differ? Compile it. Give me some
Mhm.
ideas. How do they interpret this tricky part of this verse?
Well, hello everyone. Today I am back with my dear friend Paul Hoffman, pastor over in a city that I hope to visit one day, or state, Rhode Island. How are you, Paul?
I'm well. How are you, Tommy?
Well, how is Rhode Island? How's the weather out there? How's life over there?
Yeah, it's pretty typical New England spring. It's foggy, it's wet. You get some warm days, you get some cold, rainy days. It's the whole thing all at once.
I know we haven't talked about this before, but if I was to go to Rhode Island and I am just a visitor, what would you say, Tommy? Here are the key things that you need to see and experience in Rhode Island.
Oh wow, there's so many. I think first off, I live in Newport, which is famous for its tourism. So you can take tours of Gilded Age mansions, the Rockefellers, the Carnegies. It's fascinating to see that part of U.S. history.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, it's beautiful. There's also the International Tennis Hall of Fame for those that like tennis. There's a tournament here every July. If you like seafood, there's tremendous seafood here. I think some of the best in the world. But beyond that, we still have world class restaurants. And then there's other places you could go. I think Providence is a great small city. It's actually the third largest city in New England after Boston and Worcester, Mass. But it's got, Brown and RISD. It's got the West End with like an Italian American heritage and great food, Federal Hill. And so Rhode Island, you could take a cruise, you can go whale watching, you can eat great seafood, you can stay in a wonderful spa. There is just go fishing, just a ton of activities to do. I would, Tommy, give you the royal tour. I would ask, what do you want to do? And then probably customize the experience around you.
Very, very good. Hey, look, the whale watching, the seafood, all of that is outstanding. So we're gonna have to make a trip out of it.
I love it.
Yeah. Hey, let me ask you. We recently interviewed you on your previous book. Today we're going to talk about AI shepherds and electric sheep. But before we do you like writing? How did this writing process began in you?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thanks for asking that. Actually, AI Shepherds is my third book. My first book was Reconciling Places, done with Cascade Books, which is part of Whip and Stock. And then Preaching to a Divided Nation, which we talked about last time. I guess I've always loved writing ever since I was a kid. But most people that are writers have a love-hate relationship with writing. We love it and we hate it. And so for me, I got a master's of divinity. There was a lot of writing there. And then later on, the Lord called me to do a PhD at University of Manchester, over in Manchester, United Kingdom. And so that's a lot of writing. And the British model, pretty much, it's all an 80,000 word thesis.
Wow.
And so you write way more than 80,000 words because you got to keep writing and editing. So for me, I'm a slow and steady wins the race guy. I'm not the hare, I'm the tortoise. And so when I have a book project, try and write a couple hundred words a week. In the case of the AI Shepherds and Electric Sheep, it was more like 800 to 1,500 words a week because the publisher wanted it in about 10 months.
Wow.
And
Okay.
that's where it helps the co-author. If I had to write that by myself, I don't know what else I would have had time to do to sleep. But with my co-author, Sean, I think we wrote around 65,000 words, and that makes it much more palatable if you can have a co-author.
And Paul, when you have a co-author, how did you guys split? Do you literally sit there and mean, all right, you watched, here, let's put an outline together. You take this part, I take this part, you take this.
Yeah.
I feel like it's in business school where there are some people you divide up the work, or then some people who sat together in a computer and tried to write a paper together, which was impossible.
Yeah, not having been to business school, I'm going to trust you on that. And by the way, Tommy, I love your mind. I love how you care about method and process, and it's one of your many charms and strengths.
I
So
built cell towers for a living. I had to do this every single day.
sounds way more complicated than writing a book. Let's be clear. So props to you, my friend. Yeah, it's different with each person. So my second book, which was co-authored with Matt Kim, who teaches at Baylor University,
Yeah.
my best friends, we did it during COVID. So we divided out the chapters, and then we would try and Zoom every couple of weeks. And in fact, we only saw each other once in person right before we turned in the final manuscript. So a lot of it was phone calls, FaceTime, Zoom. And then in this case, Sean and I, he only lives a couple miles away. And so we tried to do a weekly meeting where we divided up the chapters. We would write concurrently, which is always tricky because I didn't write like the first half and him the second half. We alternated. So we would provide feedback to one another, and we would do that in person. And so that was a little bit easier in the sense of seeing him in person. He would come in early, 8 o'clock. We would meet for an hour and a half on, say, a Wednesday or Thursday. And then he would go back to school. And well, in that case, it helped because he had a sabbatical. So he had more free time to work on it. However, he will tell you the story another time, perhaps. It was a really trying season because his daughter was her student visa was running out. She's British and Irish. He's Irish. His wife is British. And the daughter is both British and Irish, has passports to the EU and England. And they were trying to figure out what to do because her student visa was running out. She had been in a long-term relationship. Praise be to God. Her Navy submariner fiance or boyfriend, I forget the whole story, but he ended up marrying her. But it was challenged because he was underwater at the time. And when submariners go underwater, they're gone for a long time. So there was also some personal stuff he was wrestling through because he only has one child, and he and his wife, Mel, by the grace of God, got it figured out. She got married about a month before she would have had to leave the U.S. And, it worked out. But part of the benefit was I told him, you're going to write the last chapter. And when you're visiting your family in Cork, I want you to, because he told me stories. The Irish, old school Irish, go and they visit the graves of their ancestors. That's a very common for older generations. And he knows the stories of his grandparents and great grandparents and aunts and uncles. And it's really remarkable that he actually knows his extended family. And so when he was there, he went and visited the gravestones of his family. And I think he incorporated that beautifully in the conclusion of the book, just to talk about our future as human beings in an age where AI is becoming, the super technology is going to dominate more and more. And so how do we retain a sense of our humanity amid the advance of this, a rapid, almost incredible J-curve advance of this technology. So yeah, that's a little bit of the backstory. So we worked well together, but it's different, Tommy. It's different depending on when you co-author a book with someone else, you might have a different way of going about it.
Yeah. Hey, before we dive into the contents of this book, one more question as well, too. For those who are listening, is you were able to turn a passion or writing into something that produces income or at least some additional work. What would you say to someone who sits there and say, Pastor, how do I take something that I'm really passionate about, interested in it, and make it into somewhat of a career? What would you say to that person?
Yeah, I'm not sure. To be a career, be ready to be poor. And it's, the struggling writer is a real thing. A lot of writers I know have a side gig, or they might work for, a magazine or pastor or business person. So unless you hit it big, like in the historical fiction romance novel, or you produced Atomic Habits, James Clear, or Good to Great, there's a lot of people that unless you become a major bestseller, you're probably not going to make a lot. Not to discourage you, but I just want to recalibrate expectations. When it comes to writing, I write in the academic field, which is not known to make a lot of money. But I would say when it comes to writing, the most important thing is, and my friend Matt Kim, my co-author of my second book, said this beautifully in a post on his social accounts. You have to have something to say, Tommy. You don't want to just write because I want to be a writer and I want to be like Hemingway and go to Paris and drink coffee and drink wine and come up with something. You need to have a message. It needs to be, I would argue, and what publishers are looking for, assuming you don't self-publish, is someone that has a message. They want to know, is this person uniquely qualified to give this message? Do they have the background, the training, the life experience?
Yeah.
And then also the publisher is also, I could give you this offline, but a matrix between who is the author, what is the message, and is it something the publisher wants and is looking for and doesn't have in their current stable of horses? Because you could want to write something, but it's already being written about, or the publisher's already published a lot about it. So then you need to find a publisher that hasn't done much on that topic if you want to get a major publisher involved. But it first starts, Tommy, with passion. It starts with a willingness to do the work, to write and to rewrite, because writing clearly, writing engagingly, writing interestingly is really, really hard work. It's not for the faint of heart. But if you have a burning passion and there's something you want to contribute to the world and it may make you some money, I say go for it. And I'm always glad listeners, if reach out to Tommy. Tommy can put you in touch with me, and I'm glad to help where I can.
Paul, have you ever heard of the writer Jim Murphy?
Yes, vaguely, but I can't recall immediately things he's written.
I met him in Austin, and he wrote this wonderful book called Inner Excellence. And Jim Murphy, and when we were sitting there doing an interview, he says, Tommy, I was in so much debt because I self-published it, and eventually I bought and I was probably selling about 2 books a day. And everything changed when A.J. Brown of the Philadelphia Eagles went on the sidelines and read his book. And over the next 2 months, he sold 300,000 copies of that book.
Yes, I've heard that story. That's remarkable. Praise be to God for that. That he just happened to be reading a book on the sidelines. Everyone wants to know what A.J. Brown's reading. And I will say that's not common, but
That's not,
you never know with a book. Like some books, they start off slow. They're not charging out of the gates like the Kentucky Derby. And sometimes a book just takes off later. And that's the funny thing about publishing. You never know when the time has come for the book to take off, or some books are slow and steady. Some books are strong out of the gate. Some books, one day there's a turning point and a celebrity or someone influential, I guess you could say, will endorse it, and then suddenly it takes off. So I love that story.
Oh, I mean, a lot of times, and one more thing is, even talking to my friend who's a publisher of Moody Publishers, he was talking about When Helping Hurts by Brian Fickert. They didn't have too much expectations on it, and it suddenly became the big thing it was. Yep. And they said the title really attracted a lot of people. And then pretty soon, once they read it, word got around.
Yeah, and I'll speak to that. I've read that book. Outstanding. Changed my church's approach to, we were doing short-term missions work in Jamaica, and we read the book and we're like, ooh, what is our approach not helping our churches and our friends and our brothers and sisters in Christ down there? So I'll vouch for that book. But that's, again, it's always, again, he was Fickert was the person to write that book. So you have someone that knew exactly. Yeah. But I'm also glad that it's become a smash success.
Yeah. Hey, even for you, AI Shepherds and Electric Sheep, I mean, what caused you to write this book? I mean, AI is a thing right now. I love AI in the sense I use Perplexity. I have a fascination for stats and sports and fantasy. And I'm always creating rhythms and algorithms to help me out with that.
I love that about you. I love your brain. I love your curiosity. Tommy, you are such a gift to so many of us. In terms of the story, funny story. So what happened was I was actually with a pastor friend of mine, and we use an example from ChatGPT of a song called Jesus and Bubblegum in the beginning of the book. Spoiler alert. So my friend Cliff is a pastor in Massachusetts. We went to seminary together. And a couple weeks after ChatGPT came out, he pulled out his phone. We're having dinner. We're in Providence, chicken joint. And he showed it to me, and he's like, hey, let's write an essay on this and this. And I'd heard of it, but I'd never, this was just a couple weeks after it came out. And it just spit out a pretty decent essay. And I was like, Cliff, that's insane. Like that's, my mind is blown right now. And so that just got me, stirred up around that. I think, I forget the exact sequence. A couple months later, I ran into my friend Sean O'Callahan. At the time, he was running the PhD program at Salve Regina University, Catholic school in Newport, Rhode Island. And he is an expert in transhumanism. And he's overseen a lot of PhDs that interact with technology, transhumanism, and then a number of people that are in the military getting their PhD that are interested in the intersection of technology and humans and so forth. So I by chance ran into Sean at an event in Providence, and I told him about what happened to my friend Cliff a couple miles away, a couple months back. And I said, would you ever want to write a book on that? You're an expert in transhumanism. You get the philosophical, religious underpinnings of AI. And he's like, yeah, let's think about that. And so we started the conversation, talked a couple times. We had talked to a third person who's a PhD student at Baylor. She was not able to join us, but we put together a proposal. Suddenly, we have a proposal, and Baker Academic picked it up. So from there, it was really, really fast. We basically had to do it in, oh goodness, it might have been 8 or 9 months. Like they really wanted it quickly. We turned in the contract, and then I think they were like, no, we need it faster. And by the grace of God, we got it done, and we're really pleased with the product. We did not pick the title nor the cover art. They did a great job of that, though. I'm really proud of them. And we're hoping that this book will be a blessing and a benefit, not just to Christians who are in business or ministry or education, but we've even received great feedback from people that would not identify as people of faith that found it to be an interesting read.
Well, more so, I think a lot of times, as you and I were talking about, it's less a book of how to versus a framework, a theological framework of how to integrate AI, right?
Yes, we do have, I will say, chapter 5 is about education. We do have some do's and don'ts. And chapter 6, we do lay out a framework for what we call hearth habits. That's built around a famous philosopher. And then chapter 7 for ministry leaders, we do have do's and don'ts. But what was more important to us, Tommy, was that we build a lens. And so chapters 3 and 4 are building what we would call theological lens, because we've read a lot of books and we just didn't, written by Christians, but we didn't get a sense that there was a coherent, cohesive approach to thinking about not just technology, but more specifically AI. And so in this book, we have a research question. The research question, both of Sean and I having earned PhDs. He went to the University of Liverpool. He actually studied missiology, and I think it was the 1910 or 1912 Edinburgh Missionary Conference, which was on Christology. But our research question is, in what ways might AI help or hinder human flourishing? So that was the big question, that we define human flourishing as what we call the imago Dei, which is Latin for the image of God, which is what we're told in the first 2 chapters of Scripture, Genesis 1 and 2. We have a beautiful picture of what God's intent for human flourishing is by creating human beings in his image and likeness.
What is it that, because AI is constantly changing, what is it that you had the premises when you first started and what you ended up with, and how did it change? What changed as you were writing a book?
Oh, I might need some time on that, because I'm not sure if I can answer that right now. You asked a really incisive, detailed question. I mean, my first inclination is not too much, because it was written in such a tight time frame. And so we were paying attention to what was going on during that time frame. But also, I will tell you, publishers don't want too many ideas or principle tied to circumstances, because then the book is outdated by the time it's published. So we did give concrete examples in chapter 2, like here are 13 domains of American society, Western society, where AI is already being integrated. but we didn't want to put too much of that into the book because then the book's already outdated.
Yeah, yeah.
So I have to think more about that question. I think you stumped me on that, which is not a surprise because you're a great interviewer.
Well, I appreciate it. More so, I think a lot of times, Paul, I was watching, even in the earliest version of ChatGPT, it was just asking questions about a variety of different things.
Yeah.
Now it's creating images, videos, websites.
Yep.
I said, wow. And every single month, it seems like there's a new version popping up, 4.0 or 4.0 or something like that. And then
Yeah.
now there's Perplexity, there's this, there's that, all Gemini. So everything's constantly changing all the time.
Yeah. It's true. And I will say, we did rely on Max Tegmark, who wrote a great book called Life 3.0. He teaches at MIT. He's one of these polymaths. He's like a genius in like 3 areas. He did in his book Life 3.0, gave a range of options that we included, I think, at the end of, I think it was chapter 2, it might have been chapter 3, where he said, here's speculating any range of where we can go from AI being an assistant to on one continuum, you have like the human beings using AI to destroying AI because it gets too powerful. And then on the other end, we have AI being our friend and our helper to AI destroying us because we're fouling up the planet. We're, pumping all this carbon dioxide and we're heating up so eventually AI could say, these humans are no good anymore. So there's any range of options between one destroying the other, partnership options, or even what I think he calls the zookeeper, where human beings become the pets of the AI. And, early on, you think some of that's outlandish, but then you start to see the rapid evolution of AI.
Oh, yeah.
And even generative or general AI, where there's debates. Is it within 10 years? Is it within 50 years? I heard a podcast recently on the Ezra Klein podcast with a former official in the Biden government. He said under 5 years, we'll have Gen AI. But then I just talked to a computer scientist that teaches at Johnson & Wales in Rhode Island. And he's working with a lot of these people at MIT and other AI scientists. And he said, that's cap. He said, that's too soon. He's like, I don't see it under 10 years. The problem is we just don't know. The Chinese are working on it well. We don't really know what they know. They did recently release their version, not nearly what we have in America. The Trump administration is putting a lot of money behind companies doing it, including OpenAI. So it's one of those things that it's so speculative, Tommy, that only people with the highest security clearances or in the very depths of these companies are doing it. The last thing I'll say about that is I think it's unique and that most technology in the past was developed through partnerships with the government. And I think the government took the lead, the military took the lead. From my understanding of this is one of the newest technologies. When you talk about weapon systems or the internet, this technology has actually been more led, as I understand it, by the private sector, not the public sector. So the public sector is having to shoehorn itself in America into the conversation and try and gain whatever leverage we can, because you have companies like Meta and Microsoft and OpenAI and the list goes on and on that are doing this, and the government's like, hey, wait up. So I think it's harder for us to even know what's going on because of that.
Do you find even in the ministry, especially as you talk with some of your pastors, your fellow pastors and all that stuff, do they understand it? Do they integrate that in their sermon, their church? Where are we at with that?
Oh, such a good question. So again, if you look at what is it, the curve, the innovation curve, sociological innovation curve, the bell curve, I guess, what on the front end of it, I'm going to try and go this way. On the front end, right, you have the innovators, early adopters, then you have the middle of the bell curve, which is everybody, and then you have the laggards. And so I would find that bell curve to probably be pretty true when it comes to pastors, or ministry leaders. I have a really good friend, for example, one of my best friends in ministry. He has an MBA. His name's Michael Perez, and he's a I don't know if you call him an innovator because he didn't invent the technology, maybe an early adopter. And so he's already doing all kinds of stuff with it, trying out different programs. I mean, he's already on 4 or 5 different programs. trying it out for organizational stuff, for sermon research, and recording meetings, and then having his meetings like, immediately put into a transcript and have AI narrow it into, here are the key points, here are the key takeaways, here's the key action items. And then I have friends that just really have not done much with it, skeptical, or just haven't really made the effort to
Mm-hmm.
work with it. So I will say it's already being used, right, on Google and Bing. It's already being used in logos software behind the scenes. It's being used on our iPhone 16. And I mean, it's already there. It's just whether people are actively, intentionally engaging with it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. For you, how have you used it in your sermon preparation?
Yeah, honestly, I've kept a little bit of critical distance. I'll do some research, Google, Bing. In terms of the programs, and I'm just being 100% honest, it was so exhausting trying to write the book so quickly while doing some adjunct work and ministry stuff and family stuff, that I purposely kept a critical distance because I didn't want to be too taken with it. So I'm really relying secondhand on a lot of friends that are doing it, having conversations around that. So it's been more like minimal research and editing is
Yeah,
more of where I'm at with that. And then it's not just writing a book, it's the turnaround with the editing process, and then promotional stuff, and then cover and acknowledgments and what's going in this and that. And so I feel like so much time was taken to getting this book written, edited, and then getting it out the door, combined with other projects that I have not probably given enough time to doing the original research on my own and getting into it more.
yeah. And Paul, I would probably say for those who are listening a lot of times is, and I'd love to hear your thoughts, is you could do the general editing. Hey, look, analyze this document,
Yep.
correct it, keep the same voice, but give me all the grammar, spelling,
Yep.
punctuation. I have found one of the things that has really helped me. Let's say, for instance, I break down the passage, Jesus and the Samaritan woman, John chapter 4. Help me to really, now I've done all my studying and all that stuff, but help me to see things from Jesus's perspective, from the Samaritan woman, or different perspective, or understanding Southeast Asian perspective. What did they
Mhm.
see about this passage? Understanding African perspective. What are they seeing based on? So now, why in the world did these cultures see it from this way? And it makes me think, am I not only see it from a Western lens? Do I need to see it? Will I see it differently from a Eastern lens?
Yeah, that's a great application point. And we do recommend in the book that AI has strong applications as it relates to research, editing. Like I use Grammarly, which has AI, and I really appreciate the editing side. I would remind people that right now there's still issues around hallucinations.
Mm-hmm.
In the headlines just in recent months was, I think, a lawyer was fired. He asked AI to like create a brief, and it created case law that didn't exist, cases that didn't exist. They were hallucinations, and ended up getting fired around that. So you need to double check what you
You got to
do.
double check your facts.
Yeah, and the danger is don't get lazy. It's
Yeah.
it's you got to check it with other stuff. So I would say you can definitely use it for. So for example, in the book we say research. Like say for example you're doing a sermon series on marriage. If you're a pastor, Matthew 19. Okay, ChatGPT, Claude, whatever program. Can you find me sermons by Tertullian on Matthew 19, and Origen, and Martin Luther King Jr., and Dietrich Bonhoeffer, and Luther, and pick your favorite theologians or theologians you most respect, and put them side by side. Where do they overlap? Where do they differ?
Mm,
Compile it. Give me some
mhm.
ideas. How do they interpret this tricky part of this verse? And start there. Again, have a way of double checking because it could just make up stuff that doesn't exist. So you do need to have a feedback loop, a editing loop there.
Yeah, yeah. I love it. I love it. How about other parts of the church? I know there's the pastor and all that stuff. Have you seen other church staff, executive, how they integrate that into their ministry?
Yeah, so Glue's doing a lot with this. I encourage people to look at that, but I think there's applications around like, and I can't rattle off the programs immediately, because it's being implemented, even as we speak into, QuickBooks or, different programs around accounting software, accounting analysis, management software. We use multiple. Planning Center, I think, is a app that's using more and more AI behind it. Planning Center Online used to be just music and copyright license scheduling, but now they have the whole system. Our church uses both Planning Center for music related stuff and then Church Community Builder, which is doing more with AI. And so there's programs around that, but you could even say, if you want, you could plug it into a program and say, okay, here's my children's ministry schedule. Are people being used too often?
Yeah.
Is there someone here that's not being used often enough? Give me an analysis of this. Like, here's my most recent 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
What are the gaps? What are the trends that are being used here? Are people being underutilized, overutilized? I think it's great for, we use Canva. And so Canva for creating graphics and putting together content and releasing church content, creative content and graphics to your social accounts, website. I think there's a lot of benefit there. So there's so many uses that I think church leaders and church staff and volunteers would benefit from.
Yeah. What advice would you give to church leaders who are hesitant or fearful about integrating AI into their ministry? What would you say to them?
Yeah, I say my first thing is to say, get curious around that and say, what is it that is making me nervous? Is that I'm not great with technology? Is it that I don't understand the technology? Or is it just a healthy skepticism, which I think the Holy Spirit sometimes can give us through discernment, a healthy skepticism, or just say, okay, I want to be thoughtful. I want to be prayerful. Maybe it's just, I'm not great with tech and I need to resource the people in the church that are good with tech. So I would say use discernment, because I trust that God has put the Holy Spirit in every believer, and people contextually know their church. They know their community. They know their parishioners. Now, I will say in the book, we are big proponents of what we call selective engagement. And specifically in chapter 7, we have a go sign. I think we have, slow sign and stop sign. And originally I wanted to do the lights, right? Green, red, yellow, but that didn't necessarily come to in the black and white paper version. So we moved it over to signs. So there's certain things we say, like, don't let it write your sermon. Like if you're a minister, that is your job. That is your job. You've been trained to do it. You've been called to do it. You're a human being made in God's image with a soul that is speaking to other souls. And you have an experience a computer does not have. And your parishioners have experiences a computer does not have.
Yeah.
And preaching is not just information download. Preaching is an experience with the living God and the living voice of God and the word of God that the preacher and the congregation is having. And there's a dialectic, a conversation. You're watching. Are they receiving this? Are they confused? Are they frowning? Are they upset? Is this worrying to them? A computer can't do that. It can't. It is not equipped at this point to do that. And even if it was, I wouldn't necessarily encourage that. So we say, don't let it write sermons. We say, don't let it do your pastoral counseling. I do think I have friends that are exploring the use of AI for their own benefit, of like exploring their narrative and is there a gap in my life? But again, I think God gives spiritual gifts, and there are people that have the gift of discernment. There are people that have the gift of encouragement. This is in Romans 12, 1 Corinthians 12. Only the Spirit of God can impart these gifts into image bearers who are called to minister. And so, we do have things we say we don't think. We would recommend you do not use these tools at this point, given what we know, to do these kinds of ministry activities. But we do think there's other things you can use it for. Just be cautious. Don't become over-reliant.
Yeah.
The danger of the technology is it's so easy. You suddenly are just delegating more and more, and then you're not doing the work that the Lord, we would argue, has called you to do. And then other things were like, yeah, use it for marketing, use it for organization, use it for volunteer management,
Yeah.
use it for even mission. If you want to have your sermon or Bible study converted into another language, one of the great things is that I think AI is going to be amazing at converting the gospel
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
into languages that are yet to have a gospel witness.
Yeah, yeah. Or even simple thing, Paul, merge spreadsheets together. A lot of times, instead of having someone with all these multiple names, all these, hey, can you just do me a favor and just merge all these spreadsheets together and just double check it? I mean,
Yeah,
it'll save you a lot of
yeah,
time that way.
yeah, yeah. If you don't have an Excel Svengali at your church, like let AI be your Excel Svengali or whatever your preferred system is.
If you have one message out of this particular book that you want to make sure, a big idea that you want people to walk away from, what is it?
Oh, that's so good. It's a lot I want to say, but let me just be still with that. I would say use AI selectively, thoughtfully, prayerfully, asking yourself, how is this use of this technology helping me and others flourish?
Mm-hmm.
Is it helping and assisting their flourishing, or is it hindering their flourishing? And then I would say we create a framework in the book called a creational narrative that's based on the idea of scripture being about a creator and a first creation, and then of course the fall, and then everything culminates in the new creation, and it follows a trajectory that's laid out in Romans chapter 8. And so I would encourage people specifically, I mean, I think everything that we write is important. Sean does a great job in chapter 1 explaining what the AI is, different kinds of AI, the founders of AI. Chapter 2, we talk about current uses. But chapters 3 and 4 are where we really lay out a theological vision for how to think about AI if you're a person of faith. And I think it's even a legitimate and valid way of thinking about AI, even if you're not a person of faith or explicitly would identify as a Christian. And so get the book, read it, give us feedback. We welcome feedback, but we need to have a unified lens. And I think the problem in the future is that we're going to have potentially in the world, like a lot of things, right? This happens with economics, and it happens with education, right? We can have a Hindu understanding and a Buddhist understanding and a Christian understanding and a secular understanding. And we need to find a common ground and shared ground about how to agree what in a culture, what in a society are, what's a shared vision for education, what's a shared vision for economics, what's a shared vision for vocation, our work lives. And I would say the same for AI, because if we're not careful, and a lot of, we put this in the book, writers like Kate Crawford, who wrote a great book, Atlas of AI, she says there's a lot of power dynamics around AI, where AI can just become a tool where the strong, those that have the financial resources and the material resources, can get richer and disadvantage those who are poorer or don't have access to the water and the supercomputers. Right? We need water and hydroelectricity and other forms of electricity to power these tremendous computers that are building AI. And then the people that own it and license it can just use it to get richer and dominate it and control the licensing of it and get wealthy, like we've seen in many cases with social media companies. And I'm not an anti-capitalist, but I'm a limited capitalist. I'm a capitalist that says I want capitalism to be a way to work for everyone, if at all possible. I think there always will be rich and poor and middle class people, but also I want to make sure that everyone has access to opportunity. And so I'm a limited capitalist, or a biblical capitalist, if there's such a thing. So I hope there's the same way going forward for AI, because first off, I also don't believe people are. We should value people based on their economic output or what they own or don't own, because the rest of the world outside the West, there are so many talented people, and you know this better than me. Brilliant, talented people that just don't have access to the economy and the technologies and the resources that we have here in the West. And so I think they'd be just as successful professionally and economically if they had been born and raised in the United States like me.
Yeah.
So, that's an issue for God. I'll take up one day when I get up to heaven. So yeah, to me, there's a big thing around access, and we have to understand there are power dynamics related to all forms of technology going forward.
Very, very good. Paul, thank you very much for jumping on your book, AI Shepherds and Electric Sheep. And thank you for jumping on and talking.
Yes, thank you for having me, Tommy. God bless you, all the people you minister to, the people you're platforming. I've just been so impressed by your ministry, and I pray the Lord continues ministry, business place, whatever you want to call it, all the different amazing things you do. I pray the Lord blesses it in increasing measure.
You got it. We'll talk soon.
God bless.
All right, bye.